Eco Congregation is a Christian environmental charity. It works with Arosha, and together they're trying to encourage communities like this, church communities like ours, to really work hard on being green and looking after the planet. And that sounds very grand, but you can bring that down to small practical steps that individuals can take to make a difference. What's happening here today, we're just working with people in church and outside in the community to raise awareness about caring for the environment. That's our Christian responsibility, but it's also a responsibility as any good citizen. And we want to be careful with resources, for example, not leaving lights on when they don't need to be, not leaving the tap running when it shouldn't be, using the spare water from the kitchen to water your plants, things like that. They're just examples of how we can look after the environment more carefully, because at the rate that we're consuming things at the moment, it really isn't very sustainable. And we need to pay attention to those things, because it will be the next generation that will blame us if we don't. And already, if we just look a bit wider, there are people in poorer parts of the world who are really feeling the brunt of climate change already. And even in York, we've got more floods than we used to have, more intense and more frequent. And that's just an indication of why we need to be very careful and much more green aware.
I think there's an awful lot of choice nowadays, and I think people are too picky with what they have. Oh, I don't like that, so I won't eat it. There's a much more variety. I think you're spoilt for choice quite often. I think the diet is probably a lot better, but I think there are a lot more unhealthy foods available. My father had an allotment at the top of Burtonstone Lane, so he did go as much as we could, because we'd no garden at the house or anything. So yes, we did, and I think a lot of people grew what they could, a bit like we're trying to do now. Clothes were rations, so you made do with what you had, and I can remember if you did buy something new, you bought it much bigger than you really needed it. I can remember when I started at grammar school, I had to have a gabardine raincoat. And I was still wearing it when I was 16. It had such a big hem on it, my mother let it down every year. But you see, everything was on coupons. And you swapped clothes with friends and that. And you didn't feel belittled or anything, because everybody had to do it. I mean, we had friends, they had daughters a couple of years older than me. So they passed the clothes on to me, and they would be passed on to somebody else. But you didn't feel that, it was wrong. It was just, everybody did it. You had to save things and that. And if you had knitted jumpers and that, and you grew out of them, it would be unravelled and knitted into something else, maybe for somebody else. So, everything was made the most of.
Our church has been eco-friendly for 2 years?
2 years, yeah.
2 years now. And we hope to keep building on it, and we encourage everybody to recycle cans. We've got a compost heap, and I have got a very small garden, so I can't put a compost bin in mine, so I bring my compost up to the church, and which quite a few of the members do. With the wool, we're recycling, making blankets, crocheting them, knitting them, and it's all little pieces of wool that people would throw away because they've finished their article, and there's always more wool than you have. So we ask them for their spare wool, and we can knit blankets and send them off to wherever they need, whenever there's an emergency.
Yes, we're making rugs the old-fashioned way before you had major tools. We're just looking at recycling and reusing materials. So we've got t-shirts that we've cut up. So when you've finished with your t-shirts, we cut them up into these little strips here and use those to make them, or any material that you've got from bits and pieces to make the rugs.
My name's Alfreda, and I've been at this church for a long time, and what we're doing here today is patchwork, Old English patchwork, which is hexagons all then joined together to make sort of like a flower design. All this material that we're using, apart from a little bit, is all recycled material. It's like a lot of these sort of crafts, they're coming back. Like people wearing sort of the 40s, 50s clothing nowadays. It's all coming back, and so we're sort of using all old materials that we've had stashed away for years, and we're sort of starting to use them all again. But people are more into crafts now than they were.
I'm making a bee and bug home, but using broken down sticks, plastic bottles, ex-Coke bottles, coloured paper. More and more of the countryside, you'll find that animals are actually moving in to the towns. You've seen the foxes. You'll see now that more and more apiaries are being built in towns because there is a constant food chain the whole year through. But it's our way of demonstrating to other people that we're doing our bit for nature.
I'm just going to say a little bit about bees in particular, but pollinators. Today I'm just going to talk about why I became a beekeeper, which was some concern for the bees which were under threat. Think a little bit about why they're under threat. I brought a basket along here, which are these groceries, thinking about if we did have no pollinators, bees or all the other insects that pollinate, then what foods would we be left with? What would we still have to eat? What would we miss? And then after that, I think about what we can do to actually help the bees, to look at the things that cause the decline in the bee population and think, well, is there anything that we can do to actually help that?
In York at the moment, we're the only church with eco-congregation status. And I know there are lots of other people out there doing good things, but we just need to make it explicit and really, sing and dance about what you're doing so everybody knows. And then we'll have more people who are classed as being environmentally aware as well, and that would be great. But we need to get our politicians behind us on this as well. And we need to be saying what needs to be done so that when our politicians go to events like the climate change talks, they know that the population of this country is behind them and wants change, and we do want change. So it's everything from the small steps you can take at home, in the kitchen, at work or wherever, right through to the people who change policy on a global scale and everything in between.